And welcome to the Mount Olive Township Workshop and Council Meeting for May 28, 2019. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence for all those men and women that serve us and made the ultimate sacrifice. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Michelle, would you read the Open Public Meetings Act, please?
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Here.
Mr. Ferrante.
Here.
Mrs. Labow.
Here.
Mr. Mania.
Here.
Mr. Stewart.
Here.
Mr. Roman.
Here.
Mr. Nicastro.
Here. And before we begin, I just want to recognize that Kevin Karam and Nicholas Lyon from Troop 156 are here to earn some badges, so they're in the back taking some notes. Welcome, guys. First item for discussion, Andrew, is the building department fees.
Thank you, Council President. I provided a memo to you, which is information from the Construction Code official requesting an increase and updating the building department fees. The last they were done is in 2007. A lot of our minimum fees that we have in the code book are well below what's recommended by the Uniform Construction Code. So it's recommended that we bring them up to those minimum. Furthermore, back in March of last year, the DCA made some changes which don't require certain building projects to require permits for roofing, siding, minor deck repairs. So we're really losing a lot of revenue every year. If you look back over the last 3 years, it could potentially be about $75,000 a year we're losing in revenue from this change in law that the DCA approved. So if we bring up the fees to the minimum, we should be able to recoup those fees, and it just brings our fees back to where it's recommended they be. I do have Fred here if you have any specific questions on the recommendation.
Are we bringing them up to the average, everyone? I mean, how?
Yeah, I started, Fred supplied some numbers. I'd like to still review them. I have started to do some research on some of the surrounding towns. So based on what I see so far, everyone has adopted the minimum fees. So we would be comparable to our surrounding towns.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Roman?
Andrew, would there be anything detrimental if we don't raise our fees? Would we be decreasing services to the residents, and would it affect the operation of the building department?
You wouldn't be decreasing services, but any, the building department works a little bit differently. Any fees that department collects should be used to offset that department. So you could see our expenditures over the last 3 years, the revenues really aren't matching the expenditures. So whatever we don't make up in the building department, it's just gonna come out of the general budget.
Ms. Leyva?
Andrew, basically, what you're saying is it's almost like a utility, like the recreation utility, that the fees are, pays for the employees kind of a deal. And
They're not kept separate in a separate fund, but every year we have to certify to the DCA that our fee structure matches our expenditures within reason, because they're supposed to offset each other, but they're not held in a separate utility, right, Sherry?
No, but it's about, is it the same concept, Sherry? Yeah, that's
Same
what I thought.
concept, yeah.
Same concept, so what
Utility
happens?
concept, but not separate, Colleen.
Right.
Like Andrew said, yeah.
So then what happens if we don't make enough money to pay our staff, then we have to use general taxpayers' money to pay the staff, even though they're there to satisfy the needs of the people building and stuff, so.
Correct.
Thank you, I just wanted to clarify that.
So it's been 12 years is what we're saying first
Yeah,
of
the
all.
last change in that code was 2007.
And you're saying the fees are in line with other towns now, keeping, if that's what you're looking at?
Yeah,
basically.
I would draft work with the legal department to draft an ordinance, and at that point, I'll compare the fees a little bit more
And see
closely,
what-
but I'd like at least the direction to move forward and start
Thank you,
that
Mr. Roman.
process.
In the memo you provided, the difference, is that what the DCA looks at to see if our expenditures match our revenues?
There's a separate report that gets certified to the DCA. So
Is this, are these numbers similar or?
these
close?
are the numbers, but I took into consideration the decrease in the permit fees that we won't be receiving every year, just to show you what our potential liability would be moving forward.
And those permit fees that we'd be no longer receiving, those are for all minor work?
Line of work, roofing, siding, certain deck repairs. There's a large list of minor, but those are the big ones.
And it looks like, from what I could see here, the difference is about less than 5% that we're running between, as a deficit, just based on the numbers you provided.
I'm not sure how you calculated that.
Just based on, you said you had the average difference is 29,941,
Mhm.
based on an average revenue of 615.
Yeah, that's 5%.
Mhm.
off, so
Okay.
it's-
Yeah, that's an average over the last 3 years.
Now, are you projecting that that deficit's going to increase going forward? Because I for one would like to see at least a little bit more comprehensive report before we start increasing more fees on residents. Because in the end, we're not these are people that are improving their homes, which most of the time it's going to end up improving their neighborhood and then increasing their property value, which they'll in turn get taxed a little bit more. So before I go wanting to increase another fee and tax on residents, I would like to see at least a bit more reasoning and rationale, and what would end up hurting us as far as providing services, were we not to increase those fees.
Andrew, at the very least, while we're looking at that, as Mr. Roman suggested, can we also, I mean, we're not doing anything with it right now, we're discussing it. Can we get an increase, what the increase would be compared to what they're paying now as well?
Yeah,
Then we can
I could
compare it
provide
and-
you with the specific
Yeah,
fees that we're looking to increase and what type of a percentage.
right, because then we can look
increase
at that
it is.
as well as what Mr. Roman's saying at the same time and get a better picture for it at that point, once we see the fees, I think, is increase as well.
Okay.
Right, anything else from anyone? Thank you. All right, we have, let me see here, we have 18 resolutions. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, or comments on these resolutions at this point?
I would like to put number 1 on non-consent.
Okay, we will do that at the meeting, thank you. Seeing none there, we have an ordinance for first reading. Does anyone have any questions or concerns on that one? Seeing none, do we have any old business? Seeing none, do we have any new business? Seeing none, does anyone from the public wish to be heard at this time? If you would like to be heard, you can go up to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Yep, you can go up now and state your name and address for the record, please. And spell your last name, please.
Hi, good evening.
Oh,
Right there.
by the microphone, I'm sorry.
Mike.
Hello, my name is Dr. Bakshi. I live in Country Oaks from the inception of the colony 20 years ago. And the number of the residents is 38 Crestwood Circle, Bud Lake, New Jersey.
Could you just spell your last name for me, please?
Bakshi, B-A-X-I.
Thank you.
I have 2 comments. First of all, there is a small strip called Gold Mine, which we have to use to have access to 80 East, because in the morning the traffic is so horrendous. If you were to go the other way, that is in a very state of great disrepair. There are big potholes. It's very bad. And I approached many people, including Miss Claudia, and they told me that there might be inception of repair soon enough. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So I'm just requesting the council here to take some action. Number two, we live in a colony that is beautiful, peaceful, free from crime, absolutely great colony, and I'm glad we found a spot there. There are about 200 families living there. We keep the place clean, neat, we take care of things, and we do abide by the laws and regulations of the local authorities. Now the problem is, in the morning, when we want to take Route 46 on the right or Route 46 on the left, to go either to East 80 or West 80, it is almost an impossible task. We have to wait 15-20 minutes because both ways the traffic is horrendous. It's very bad, and it's not connected, it's not synchronized, and we just have to stand there, wait for the traffic. One side stops, the other one starts or continues. And no sooner you think that you can go, because both sides have almost stopped, there's always a car that's coming. It's a very risky proposition. Request is a light, traffic light, be installed in that intersection called Connelly Avenue near Bud Lake Plaza. That would ease the problem of those 200 families who stand up in line for 15 minutes, almost 20 minutes to cross. So other than these two situations, Gold Mine Road and this traffic, it's an ideal location, and I'm very proud to be there. I would never want to get out of that place. Thank you.
Thank you. As far as the, I know we're looking at, what happened with Gold Mine? Is that,
We're still doing some general improvements
Right.
on Gold Mine to fix some of the drainage issues. We're gonna,
because that's going to be
that's gonna be
open?
done shortly, yeah.
Right.
It's gonna be opened up,
It's going to be open both ways, right?
Both ways.
Both ways, that's
Right.
going to be opening as well.
yeah.
And as far as the street light, we've been trying for a long time from New Jersey Department of Transportation, and they just have not approved any lights for that area. We keep trying, but that's a state highway, so we don't control it. We could only ask the state. And we will ask again. I know we have another meeting coming up that you might be able to at least inquire again, because we keep asking. But we understand the situation, and we're trying
Thank you.
to improve. Thank you for,
Please. Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up to us as well. Oh, Mr. Roman, I'm sorry.
Andrew, can we just make it along with some of the other requests that we give to the DOT, just on a on a routine basis? That way we don't have to,
Sure.
wait every time a resident comes up. That way we just keep, hammering them, and eventually,
Hammering 'em.
like, wear them down, Chinese water torture style, I guess.
Okay.
All right.
Just your name and address, please.
Bhavana Baxi, BAXI, 38 Crestwood Circle, Bud Lake, 07828. First point is about the Lakeland bus stops. There used to be a bus stop at the intersection of Route 46 and Connelly Avenue on both sides. And one fine morning, there was like a pencil change. The signs were removed and bus stops were eliminated. So we talked to transit, we talked to Lakeland bus drivers. Somehow this change was made without including people who usually take the buses morning, afternoon, and evening. Now, the buses start from Lake. There are no parking spots along 46 between Lake and Route 80. Also, the bus would start from Bud Lake and first stop would be in Netcong. So it doesn't make sense. The bus starts from Bud Lake, doesn't pick up passenger, or there are not enough provisions for Bud Lake residents to park or board the bus, and it stops into Netcong. So what my request is to reinstate those bus stops. If town was not included in the process of determining which stops should be kept and which stops should be eliminated, then I think town should look into how these bus stops were determined or eliminated. And I again request to bring back those bus stops. My suggestion is to have bus stops every half a mile so that when bus starts, people don't have to drive to any place and just can walk to the Route 46 to take the bus to New York. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was gonna scan.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Do they contact us, or they just?
I'm not sure when they were removed. I mean,
It was been a while now,
prior
right?
to me. It's new to me.
It's
but
been
I
many
could-
years it's been gone. I think. 2
not-
years?
Since 1999, we really have mapped out the entire Lakeland route. And the reason why we chose this place is we could walk to Route 46 and take a bus in the morning to New York.
Yeah, we
And-
have to contact them.
Yeah, I'll contact
We'll
them.
contact them and see what the issue is, and if we can resolve that.
Right, if we need to approach Lakeland, then if you would convey this to us, or it was done with town in confidence, or they arbitrarily determine which bus stop should be kept and which should be eliminated. I think town should have been taken into confidence before this action happened. Happened 2 years ago, I believe.
We'll find out. You
Yeah,
you
we
can
have the
reach her, right?
contact
You can
info.
contact her. So we'll find out, and they'll get back to you on that.
Right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else at this time wish to be heard?
Good evening, everybody. My name's Rob Meyer. I live on 12 Waterloo Valley Road. I have a few things I wrote out here, so I'm going to kind of stick to it. I don't want to go too long. My name is Rob Meyer. I've lived at 12 Waterloo Valley Road since 1998. I live there with my family. We live in what I consider one of the nicest natural areas in Mount Olive and possibly Morris County. Over the past 10 years, I've seen an increase in the park use by hikers, campers, fishermen, hunters, mountain bikers, and kayakers. It's basically the second entrance to Stevens State Park. I'm here tonight to ask the council not to pass the resolution to officially allow KDS aggregates to start up operations until they've addressed the concerns of the residents. The resolution allows heavy truck traffic carrying potentially hazardous materials through the park from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on the weekdays and 6 a.m. to noon on Saturdays. Most of the folks being affected by this resolution are at the end of the road and have lived at the addresses for close to 20 years. There are not many of us, so maybe that is why we were never notified of the town's plans to allow a recycling company to open on the road in the middle of a vast park area. I understand they have a Highlands exemption. There was no legal requirement, as we all live outside the 200-foot notification limit. I do feel there should have been a moral obligation as township residents and taxpayers to let us know. So we really just started to find out about all of this. The facility will process construction debris, including asphalt. Since they started operations, the quality of life in our homes has been seriously degraded. My neighbors and I just started figuring out what was going on when we noticed the dramatic increase in heavy truck traffic and the destruction of our road over the past several weeks. To smooth out the road, the facilities are spreading dirt and gravel fill, which creates a dust storm with an increase in the heavy trucking. Considering the price paid for the property and the taxes collected, it doesn't make sense to me at this time why the town or the state would not have wanted to include this property in the wonderful natural area surrounding it. According to the records available, my family is paying more taxes to the township than the new facility. The trucks are allowed to begin traveling up and down the road at the ends of our driveway through Stevens State Park between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. during the week. They're allowed to use the road from 6 a.m. to noon on Saturdays. You can hear and feel them from inside the houses. Walking my dog down to the bridge on a Saturday morning has become dangerous. Fishing from the bridge, not advised. The visibility at the bottom of the road is limited, which is a safety concern to us and visitors to the park. The trucks are a hazard to anyone coming in or out of the park from this direction or traveling up the road to the interior of Stevens State Park. The hill is pretty steep, so engine noise from the trucks is excessive as they power up the hill or downshift down the hill. I'm concerned about their ability to stop. Our quality of life has been reduced as some days as many as 100 large trucks pass our house. We counted 61 last Friday, and on rainy days there seems to be a little bit less. There have been so many trucks unfamiliar with the area that Waterloo Village State Park had to put up a special sign which is chained to the front signpost. It says, "No trucks, this is not Waterloo Valley Road." They were making the wrong turn, and apparently they had to put the sign up. Some of the trucks passing us are loaded above the top. This can be seen by the bulge in the dust screen. From what I could find in the short amount of time I've had to look into it, a triple axle dump truck can hold around 20 tons. This would mean 20 to 25 trucks would meet the 500-ton limit established by the town. But the 500-ton limit is only for receiving. I guess they're allowed to ship things out as well, from what I could find. Another major safety concern is the bridge over the Musconetcong River onto Waterloo Valley Road. It's an older single-lane bridge with a natural gas main strapped to the side. It looks to be about 8 inches in diameter. The curbs are currently crumbling and there's no weight limit posted. Sometimes we have as many as 2 or 3 trucks on the road because they back up. The corner there by the railroad is a little bit difficult to see, so we're concerned about pulling out and things like that. I kind of went under there the other day. Some of the foundation is made up of natural rock, so it's not like a modern poured concrete reinforced foundation. The rails on it are U-channels. There's no structure to them. They're just to keep things from going over the side, so it's not a truss configuration. An alternative would be Kinney Road. Kinney Road has a stronger, more modern double-lane bridge that would allow trucks to access the facilities. They would still need to travel through the heart of Stevens State Park for the hours that I stated. The new facility at 46 Waterloo Valley Road is recycling old construction material, which is very different than processing sand and gravel. This is taking place in a township mining zone, which seems to govern the process of quarrying. This implies a natural material being processed from the local ground. From what I could tell, all certification and inspections are done by the KDS employees. They use a portable asphalt or a portable grinder to process the materials. From what I can see, these operations are carried out in the open environment without any special precautions for dust containment. The unprocessed and processed materials end up in a pile on the ground, from what I can see, with no ground barrier. When it rains, the water will leach through the ground and the asphalt into the ground towards the aquifer. NJDEP's Asphalt Recycling Guide points out the environmental and public hazards of processing asphalt. There is a possibility of groundwater contamination. Will any of this have an effect on the health of the Musconetcong River or drinking water? Before I moved into my home in 1998, there was an issue when the quarries were pumping water into the Musconetcong River. This created a cone of depression, which caused some of the wells on the street to run dry, including my own, which I didn't know before I moved in. All of that was before the Highlands Act. So my neighbors and I know there is a direct connection between our water and what happens up the road. It concerns us. We still have all the original paperwork, which is, I think, like a foot thick from those interactions with the state. And some of the paperwork implies that the state does not always catch everything. So I think some of the inspections that they did early on don't take into account some of the things. Certainly, I feel sad. That's probably my best word, and sorry for the way things are going given the day and age. I have a bunch of other stuff, and I have some pictures that I would like to submit. Some are from the document published by the DEP. I have something from the township's land use ordinance, which says, it is the intent of this section to license and regulate quarries situated within the mining district for the protection of persons and property and for the preservation of the public health, safety, and welfare of the township and its inhabitants, and to ensure that quarrying activity shall be conducted in such a manner as to create a minimum of annoyance from noise and dust to nearby owners or occupants of the property to provide for the safety of persons, particularly children. So I don't know if that's been changed since, you know, the idea to adopt the resolution. I have a letter from, part of a letter from 1998, and we have all the letters, that shows, it says something, let me find the part here. The review of CLEP's hydrogeologic information reveals one consistent fact. The groundwater flow conditions, hydraulic characteristics of the underlying aquifer zones and their hydraulic interactions, and the overall hydrogeology have not been adequately delineated to make any inferences as to what the impact the present and future site operations have on the existing complex hydrogeologic environment beneath the site. Accordingly, more hydrogeologic data is required before sound decisions can be made with respect to what impacts Saxton Falls, which is the property next door to the one that they're going to start operating on, has on the surrounding environment. I got pictures of cracks in the curbing on the bridge with the natural gas main in the back. I got pictures of the railing showing that it's just a basic U-channel, the foundation with some rocks in it. I got pictures of the Kinney Road Bridge, which is a nice modern bridge. It's double laned, looks to be pretty sound construction. I got pictures of the asphalt grinder operating at the site last week. I got the sign in front of Waterloo Village that diverts the trucks up to my road. I think that's what I got. So thank you for your consideration.
Andrew, we have more presents, I'm sorry. Yep, you're fine.
Hello, thank you for offering us this opportunity.
Just state your name and address, please, for the record.
My name is Lucas Frank, 23 Waterloo Valley, speaking on the same issue. I was involved in the sort of disaster that befell us back in '98 when Saxon Falls illegally pumped water from the aquifer directly into the Musconetcong and fooled the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection in the process. This feels like a redo of that event. What I'd like to do here is play for you some of the, or try to, technology being what it is, some of the noise of these trucks. These are not normal dump trucks. These are industrial trucks, 3-axle rear, 80,000 pound trucks, 40 ton, am I correct there? Or 20 tons. Let me try to see if I can play this for you. Can you hear that? Mm-hmm. This is an enormous truck, and I'll just have you look at this again if I can. Look at the size of that truck. Imagine 100 of those going by your house.
They go by my house too. Kindly go by they go by my house too.
Imagine 100 of those going by your house every day if you live on a rural road.
It's a tri-axle truck.
It's a tri-axle truck. The other day there were 61 of them in and out, 30 in, 30 out. Going by your house every day. Next to Stevens State Park. I just took two days worth of video, photographs with a game camera, you know, one of those things you can strap to a tree to look for your bear. And you see a combination of walkers, bikers, bicyclists, and these enormous trucks coming through there, including on weekends. A lot of concern here. The language of the resolution and other documents that I've seen suggest that that part of the agreement is the access to Waterloo Valley Road. Should that be necessary, there are two ends to Waterloo Valley Road. One of them is quite industrial, and it could be routed. They could be routed that way, or as Rob was saying, Mr. Meyer was saying, over the Kinney Road Bridge. There's no need whatsoever for these trucks to be coming over a small local bridge onto a residential road by a state park. And for that reason, I urge you to, and some more that I'll mention, to not pass this resolution at this time until these issues have been looked at. A little bit of inquiry indicates also that there was an application for New Jersey DEP for a Class B recycling facility, and there was a request for more information which has not yet been provided to New Jersey DEP. There has been no freshwater wetland delineation submitted by KDS, nor has there been a flood hazard area verification submitted by KDS. So I would at least suggest, at the very least, that this resolution be held until all the permitting processes are completed. This is, and I really think that the routing to this plant, should the plant be allowed to continue, which I also question for the reasons that Rob talked about, have already been victimized by the actions of these corporations and their, quote, mining operations once. I'd rather not have it happen twice. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public right now wish to be heard?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Bill Evans. I live in next door Washington Township, Morris. I note that Mount Olive is signatory to the Musconetcong River Management Plan and is a voting member of the River Management Council. That oversees the implementation of the River Management Plan that created the wild and scenic designation for the Musconetcong River. You are part of that council. Asphalt is crushed rock and a hydrocarbon binder. Our principal concern is that the runoff from the site might affect water quality in the Musconetcong River. And I'd like to know what steps would be taken by the applicant to ensure that any contaminants stay on the site. There will be, as has been noted, a considerable amount of triaxle truck traffic bringing material to and from the site. The council's concerned that the quality of life of the nearby residents who live along Waterloo River Road. There are two access roads that have been noted from County Road 604, which is about the only way to get into it. And I'd ask that the council require that trucks entering and leaving the site to use the Kinney Road access. Does anybody know what the weight-bearing capacity of the southern entrance off Route 604 is? That's one real question. Is that bridge strong enough to handle the 100 or so triaxle trucks that are going to be using it? There's only one house on the roadway to the north up to Kinney Road, and there's probably a dozen or more of your residents that live below on the southern access to Waterloo Road. I'll hold my fire, but I'm very concerned that this is not a complete application to DEP. They have apparently a deficiency letter was sent out on March 29th, and there's no record that the applicant has responded with additional information that DEP requested. No permit for the site has been issued, and I'm concerned that you'd be approving something that DEP has not yet approved. So take it easy, hold on to this thing, let these issues be resolved, and I thank you.
Anyone else at this time?
Joe?
Yep. Please.
Thank you. Good evening. John Inglesino. I'm the attorney for KDS, who represented them before the Mount Olive Planning Board last summer in which they received site plan approval from the board. And while I appreciate the concerns that were expressed here tonight by the residents, and there may or may not be more, the fact of the matter is that all of what you heard tonight was really appropriate for the board, planning board, not the governing body at this stage of the process, and frankly, should have been heard before the planning board with sworn testimony and the requisite proofs that are needed for the appropriate board, which you're not, to even consider the subject matter that was presented to you tonight. So I want to make sure that, again, while I appreciate the sentiments and concerns of the residents, that there's a process that we follow here under the municipal land use law for approvals. And my client received its approval from the planning board. Resolution was adopted last August. We have met every obligation and prerequisite required by this municipality in order to have a developer's agreement signed and approved. That is largely an administrative act by the governing body. I understand that there's a vote that you have to take for it, but it's an administrative act in the sense that, and I say this as a former municipal attorney, as a former mayor, and someone who represents developers, so I've seen this on all sides, is that your job, in my view here, is to ensure that the requirements of your municipality have been satisfied before the developer's agreement is executed and entered into. And I think that your council will tell you, and your professionals will tell you, that all of the requisite action required by my client has been done, including site plan approval and all of the other requirements post-approval that are required for the developer's agreement. And so our view is that we're really entitled at this point to the developer's agreement vote and execution of the developer's agreement so we can move on. I would also add that the developer's agreement is in largely there to protect the interests of the municipality. All the provisions in the developer's agreement virtually are there to protect the town, not my client. We would be more than happy to proceed with our project without the developer's agreement. We understand we can't do that. We had a lot of submissions to make and a lot of requirements that we had to satisfy, provide and satisfy your professionals. We're satisfied in the appropriate way, so we'll do that, and we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to do everything that we're required to do to lawfully operate our business at that location. But again, while I appreciate the concerns of the residents, I also have to tell you that I think that those concerns should have been expressed before the planning board, which was the appropriate place to do it, and that tonight, in my view, is really largely administrative act on the part of the governing body based upon the recommendation of your professionals that we have submitted to their satisfaction all of the requirements necessary to get your vote to enter into the developer's agreement. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Inglesino, with respect to your comment that this is not the appropriate board to hear residents' complaints, I must, disagree with you. Whether you may be factually correct that these items should have been brought before the planning board, the fact that it may or may not have been done at that time, the fact that residents have come out to speak against the impact that it's having onto their livelihood and their neighborhood, that's I need to speak up, So whether legally we may be bound to sign by the developer's agreement, I just need to comment that whether a resident has a complaint, whether one resident or multiple on any road or any neighborhood in this municipality, this, in my opinion, this council will hear and take action if appropriate, whenever that's possible.
Well, I apologize. I didn't mean to suggest that you shouldn't hear residents' complaints. My point was, and I apologize if I didn't make it as artfully as I should have, is that I don't think it's appropriate or lawful for the council, for example, to say that we're not going to approve the developer's agreement because of truck traffic or because of any evidence that you've heard tonight. Because first of all, those the subject matter that is not before you for consideration in the legal sense. That subject matter, for any consideration to have been given by the appropriate board, and you're right to use the word appropriate, should have been made to the planning board. Certainly, any resident has any complaint in town, it's absolutely appropriate for them to come up here and voice that to you. My point was simply, to use your word, the appropriateness of the merits of what was presented tonight relative to the vote that you have before you.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone else from the public on this issue?
Joe?
Seeing none, oh, you have a question for, I was going to ask the attorney, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question, Mr. Inglesino, when, over this way, when it was, the application was before the planning board, as the gentleman mentioned, that they were not notified because they were out of the 200-foot radius for notification, and having that many trucks coming down your street would be an impact no matter what, and I am really having a hard time understanding why weren't they notified?
Well, I guess 2 points there is, number one, I don't know how many trucks are actually coming down the street, and neither does anybody else. I know what was said, but again, this is not in the context of sworn testimony and experts and so forth and so on. So I think that I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying that I don't think it would be appropriate to take whatever is said here in this context as something that's true as a matter of fact. But with regard to the notice, my client complied with all the requisite legal notice that is required under the municipal land use law, which includes publication in your newspaper. So it's not to say that there wasn't any notice provided to the public. There
Wasn't direct to the resident.
Well, because it's not required.
It wasn't required.
And nobody can compel it. That is a law that's provided by the municipal land use law, and we complied with the law.
Was there a traffic study done in the application?
My recollection is that there was. I guess I'm referring to Mr. McGroarty because he was here for the testimony. There was not a traffic study done.
And I guess I'll have to ask Mr. McGroarty. I would think that a traffic study would be part of the application. If you're bringing in trucks like that through a residential neighborhood, there should have been some kind of study done saying whether there would be an adverse negative impact to the residents. And not only that, I'm thinking, we have Mr. Quinn's in the back room. I'm thinking about the road, how much money that road is going to cost, because you'll have trucks going over a road like that. You're just shaking that road apart. Not that I'm not sympathetic to the residents, but also the cost involved in the wear and tear on the road is tremendous for that. That road wasn't built for that.
I'm going to have our attorney, he has some stuff he needs to say.
Just briefly.
And he wants to go into that, but also addressing the concern of the street. I had that question as well. Can the entrance be moved in any capacity without
and
breaking our
rules? A lot of good
rules?
questions, and what I did, I can say that when I reviewed the history of this today, and Mr. Inglesino, if you want to stay up there, you can, it's up to you.
You don't have any more further questions for me?
I don't, but the question of whether or not there was any sort of a discussion or thoughtful investigation of alternate plan routes for this operation, it's not in the record before me. What I can speak to is that this has indeed, to confirm what you said, was approved by the planning board in July of 2018. That was the opportunity for legally objections and for all those things that are required under the MLUL. Sworn testimony. Today, obviously, we are here to hear comments and concerns, but legally speaking, that ship has already left the dock. As far as our review as town attorneys with regard to this approval. And what I would say about the developers agreement, just from the perspective of the town, is that recognizing that this planning board approval has already happened, what developer agreements generally do as a benefit is it's the mechanism to ensure that all of the benchmarks and the time periods and the minutia are actually enforced with regard to this operation going forward. So to suggest that we would not approve the developers agreement under this administrative umbrella, I think is counterproductive. I think that we should probably move forward with just the understanding that with KDS in the room with the council, to address the, what's obviously clearly concerns to the residents who live on that street. And I've represented both sides on this too, council. I've seen, residents who've complained about mining operations in Warren County, and we have somebody from Washington Township here. I've been on the other side. So I would just, what I think that could happen still, recognizing that you're a partner in the community, is to look at alternate possibilities for the operation that don't impact the public in the way that we've heard tonight.
Changing the routes for.
And possibly just reinvesting.
It's really
King
changing the
Road is
routes
something
is the
new to me.
biggest.
So that's just, my suggestion.
Right. Mr. Romer?
Just questions for both Andrew and council. Is there any modifications that we can do to the developers agreement that would at least address or mitigate some of the residents' complaints that we're aware of at this time?
I'd like to look at it first before I answer that question, because to be candid, I have not read the entirety of the developers agreement.
So based on that, would it be prudent for us to table this
Table it.
resolution until you do your due diligence?
I'd like to take a look at it before we move. And then, again, I'm not suggesting that you don't move forward as a council if you have the vote to move forward. Again, it's an administrative thing.
I'd like
But
to
before I get an opportunity to say yes, I would like to look at it.
Andrew,
Sure,
would
I
we
have a
be-
lot of questions,
Andrew,
too.
Would we be putting the township in any legal repercussions were we to table this resolution?
You should ask the attorney about the legal repercussions. We need to get we want to have a pre-construction meeting with KDS. We want to talk about the off and on-site improvements. We want to address these concerns to.
And if they're part of the developers agreement, we don't want that to stop.
Right.
But if there's something of substance in the development agreement that we could actually add that will mitigate these concerns, I think that would be something worth talking about. So maybe I can just ask counsel if he has a copy. I mean, honestly, I can look at it right now. if it's something
I
we
can
have.
tell you that my client will be happy to meet with municipal officials to discuss these concerns. But the concerns I heard tonight really did not reflect on issues concerning a developer agreement in concept. Virtually all of the concerns I heard tonight were issues that were appropriate for the planning board. And so, with all respect to the council, I did not hear any issue expressed by the public here tonight that is appropriate for a developer's agreement. Every one of the issues heard here tonight was appropriate for the planning board. And as we all know, these developers' agreements are essentially boilerplate documents that are designed to provide protections for the municipality. If council hasn't read the agreement, we're here at the meeting, I don't know what to say about that. But I do feel that, my client shouldn't be prejudiced, by in some way be prohibited from going forward because an agreement hasn't been read and issues have been raised that just conceptually don't apply to a developer's agreement. The routes that trucks take, things of that nature.
That's the question I have, does the developers agreement address the routes that are taken?
It shouldn't. I mean,
If it
those
doesn't, then I don't have any objection.
those are inherent in the planning board process.
That's the part that I want to make sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
it
that's all I
doesn't.
need to see. Again, my position really is if that developers agreement is silent on the routes, then we wouldn't have any objection. I wouldn't suggest that we stop based upon this, because it really is a safeguard for us to make sure that they're honoring their agreement moving forward. It's not going to, by holding it up just because there's no provision with regard to the routes, I don't see that as beneficial.
Is there an option to change those routes? That's what I mean, through this process, once it's approved?
Once it's approved, it's approved. Once it's approved, it's approved.
It's already been approved.
That's the question
Thank you.
that I had was.
I think the question is, you can't add something into the developers agreement that's not in the planning board resolution.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
That's improper, it's beyond.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
the borders of the
Legally, we
agreement.
can't do what we would want to do, which is change the route, because it's not
You know,
part of the original plan from
If
the
down the
planning.
road you want to put a weight limit on certain roads, that could be done through a
change
separate,
that later on.
through a separate ordinance.
We could do a separate ordinance to
Right.
address it a different way. I got you. Okay, that makes sense then, at least.
Yeah. And just so the council knows, Tim and I drove the route on Friday, and I got a hands-on view of what the residents are talking about, and we've reached out to the county. I've let them know about the bridge concerns, so they are going to look into it. They've acknowledged that, it might need to be reinforced a little bit. The bridge on Kenny Road, I believe, is a 5-ton limit, so rerouting, any time in the short term, I don't think is feasible. And the route all the way down Waterloo Valley Road where that other warehouse is going, they're still under construction. They'll be doing some improvements there, but until that's done, in the short term, there's no alternate route for the trucks.
Right, go ahead.
And just to make perfectly crystal clear that I don't have an objection, I really urge that the DAB move forward tonight. It is boilerplate, and the one very important paragraph is that this agreement compels the developer that they shall comply with and adhere to any and all rules, regulations, and ordinances. So to follow up, if there's any concerns with regard to bridges or weights or hours, this is what holds them to that agreement. It's what we use as the governing, the measuring post, if you will, for them to abide by the conditions that were approved at the planning board last July.
So if the council so chooses down the road at some point to change the weight limit on that particular road, the trucks would have to be rerouted to another way to go
Correct.
through there. And that's the process that we would have to take if we choose
Right.
to avoid the route. Okay. Understood.
Hi, Rob Meyer again, 12
Yep.
Waterloo Valley Road. You said, Mr. Tatarenko, you said the Kinney Road Bridge has a 5-ton limit. That bridge, you know, my background is I'm an engineer. I'm actually licensed with the state. That bridge can hold way more than the bridge on our street. In the interim, while, you know, we're working out all the little details with this guy, what happens if a bridge takes, or a truck takes that bridge down? They're probably in excess of 20 tons, and the gas line goes. It's an 8-inch main. Who's got the liability on that? I just don't know, because my family's there and my neighbors. Second thing, is it open? Is the facility actually open before the agreement is signed? Because they've been running trucks, and they've been grinding away, and if it's not technically open, how do we trust anything that they're telling us as far as, you know, truck inspections on incoming material? You know, where's it coming from? I don't know. So, I got 2 more. And another one is, who determines the hours of operation? Is that a town, or is that a state thing?
That's town ordinance.
And I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to point out that the resolution before the council tonight quotes from, and I'm not a lawyer, but, and so I may misinterpret this, and I recognize that. I'd like to know if I do. But essentially, one of the whereases is that they've negotiated an acceptable developers agreement attached here too as Exhibit A, and then it quotes just below that, saying that ADS is liable for improvements to Waterloo Valley Road, which seems to me to commit the town to using Waterloo Valley Road, and that's one of the reasons I think that the town should hold off on passing this resolution. But again, I'm not a lawyer.
It's basically boilerplate. It's boilerplate. And we put that in there because sometimes.
Yeah, Chuck's up.
You want me to respond?
Yes.
Good evening, Chuck McGrady, Township. A couple things, just for the dates. This application was actually what's known as a bifurcated application. They came in first for the use variance itself and that was approved back in October of 2017. At that point, it was actually my decision. I said that the recycling facility, in my judgment, was not a permitted use in the mining district. And the applicant and their experts did not contest that. With Mr. Inglesino as their attorney, they approached the planning board and secured a use variance for the Class B recycling facility with limitations. Class B being a designation by the state of New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, not the town of Township of Mount Olive. So then there was also a use variance for what are known as several or 2 or more principal uses on the property, which is really not at issue at the moment. They then came back in July of 2018 and secured site plan approval. So they got the use variance first, and then came back in July of 2018 and got a site plan approval for the recycling facility and a future small, as it's defined or described, a small concrete plant and an office building. As of today, none of those improvements are in place except for the grinder, and there's some temporary storage containers and the like out there. The council, you'll recall that you adopted a resolution endorsing submitting this plan to the county in the solid waste management plan, and it was in fact adopted as an amendment in 2018, September 2018, by Morris County in the county's solid waste management plan. And lastly, in November of 2018, DEP approved the county's effort, the effort by the freeholders, to amend the plan and include it. So, brings us to where we are today. Actually, we discovered, myself and Mr. Brzezinski, the late Mr. Brzezinski, he and I discovered that the operations were in fact going on in April, or thereabouts, late March, early April. He and I went out to the site. We talked to the operator, who's the owner of the property, Xavier Piamenta, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. If I'm not, I will stand corrected. And he had one other person there. We explained to him he did not have his developer's agreement in place, even though he had his planning board approvals, and therefore he shouldn't be operating. He explained to us, and I've come to learn later, well, first of all, he claimed ignorance of the fact that he should have proceeded with the developer's agreement, which in our view was really not important. It was rather neither here nor there. We just said you have to proceed, get that developer's agreement for all the reasons that you've heard this evening, particularly from your attorney, that way we can have a meeting, which is what we always do. We sit down with the contractors, with our side. We go through the resolutions. We go through all of the outside agency approvals if they are required. And then we make sure that there's an inspection regime installed so that we know what's going on. It is my understanding from what the operator has told me and provided me documentation that what he is doing at present is what is called self-generated recycling. In other words, it's coming only from his own facilities. He has a notification of exempt recycling activities, which was issued to him, which doesn't exclude or it does not exempt the township's requirements, but he was proceeding on this basis. Now he understands, of course, he still has to comply with local requirements. And I just wanted to be clear about something. He's not mining, and he's not bringing in hazardous materials. What he's permitted to recycle is concrete, asphalt, and he's also allowed to process topsoil or soil to create topsoil that comes only from his own projects. He is involved in construction projects in New Jersey. He was working on the road, on the bridge right down the road from us here. So when he does secure the Class B license from the state of New Jersey, which it is my understanding he doesn't have yet, he tells me, he has told me it's pending and he expects it within a week or two. But that's an issue that we would go over at the pre-construction meeting. Once he has the Class B recycling license, he will be allowed to take concrete and asphalt from other parties in addition to his own construction operations. He will never, however, be able to take any soil from any other project except his own. And that language, we amended the developer's agreement today, and I added some language at the end. I think it's paragraph number 25. I know it was very late, but we wanted that in there. Yes, it is. As Mr. Inglesino was saying, and the reason why I put it in there is not because I'm clever or invented any additional controls. That was language in both of those resolutions of the planning board. And we felt, even though the resolution, or rather developer's agreement, has a all-encompassing language, we wanted to be very specific. So I will point out one other thing. I asked about, I did some research of my own. The Class B license, of course, is the jurisdiction of the DEP. And under their regulations, which are set forth in the administrative code under 7:26A, et cetera, or exequia, as it were, it sets forth all sorts of requirements, including site design requirements, reporting requirements, all the things that we would sit down with them and say, even though the Township of Mount Olive is not the one to regulate what the state of New Jersey says you must have as a Class B facility, we also want to make sure that the site complies. So, and I will point out my one other comment with regard to what the state's position is. There was a letter sent to the operator by the state of New Jersey, Compliance and Enforcement. This is from Rochelle Wormley, Acting Assistant Commissioner. This is dated May 10, 2019. I won't read the whole letter. It's essentially saying that the site, based on an inspection on May 1st, 2019, is in compliance. So I am not dismissing or diminishing. I've talked to several of the residents that have spoken this evening and one or two others who have not. We will be very careful about making sure that they adhere to whatever the DEP requires. We expect the DEP to make sure they adhere to it. It's their regulations, but it's here in Mount Olive, so with respect to dust control and the like, we want to make sure that that everything is in order, as it were. And lastly, with regard to trucks, I will point out, of course, there are other trucks on Waterloo Valley Road, and I'm not here to defend or one side or the other, but Saxon Falls Sand and Gravel certainly generates a fair amount of truck traffic. There's been a significant amount of truck traffic. I've observed this myself. I go out there, to check on things, coming in from not only the Skinnell project further down, but some other work that's going on. So that's really all I can say about that. I will end with one comment, which is that with respect to the comment about Waterloo Valley Road, this operation is a little distracting, but this operation will be required.
Let's keep the comments.
You can't, he's picking it up over here, so thank you.
This operation will be required to pave the portion of Waterloo Valley Road in front of their business. They're not required as an off-track improvement to go beyond that, and there's reasons for that, again, as you I'm sure know, under the municipal land use law, there's limitations as to how many off-track improvements can be required. So that's my contribution to the conversation. If any other questions I can help, I'm here, obviously.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Lebo.
Chuck, Mr. McGarty, I just have a question about the asphalt millings. Is that the millings that they're bringing in to recycle?
Oh, I believe so,
Yeah.
yes.
Years ago I thought...
Among other asphalt products, as far as I understand.
Right.
Mhm.
What I was concerned about was, I thought that a while ago that the county has passed a law prohibiting millings to be used and so on and so forth because of their content, their ingredients, and it, when it's separated or whatever, the oils in there can get into the water.
I don't know about the county's position about using milling on roads. The county certainly endorsed this recycling facility and said there was a need that for to have a recycling facility to process concrete and asphalt rather than to bring it to, wherever that kind of material goes. If it doesn't get recycled, it gets dumped somewhere, I guess. There are many other components of a Class B license, recycling license under the DEP regulations, that one could potentially have. And what the planning board imposed, the condition, and there was no disagreement on the part of the applicant, was that this site, not only for this operator, but in perpetuity, so any other future operator will be limited only to concrete and asphalt. And again, as I mentioned, topsoil production is only related to soil coming from the site of this operator.
And for the asphalt and concrete, there's a specific procedure that has to be met in the whole process?
As I mentioned, the DEP regulations, which run over 140 pages, deal with the entire universe of recycling facilities, Class A, B, and so on, C and D. This is a Class B. There are specific requirements for that as well, yes. And by the way, this the surface there is essentially compacted. In some places, actually old concrete, because it was a facility at one time, a concrete facility or an asphalt facility at one time. And the site plan, which, again, we want them to get to the point of doing the site plan improvements now that it's been approved, calls for new pavement to be placed down there. And there are
Which will be more
buffers to the-
protection?
There are buffers to the river, to the north and to the west.
Okay, very good. And who regulates, who enforces the regulations for the process of the product?
There's annual reporting requirements. I believe it's every March. All the material, the tonnage, et cetera, has to be, every truck comes in, has to be documented. That has to be reported, but again, that's all under the DEP.
DEP
The
then.
county will get that information, we will find a way also to get that information that'll be available to the township, because it'll be public information. Who
Okay.
enforces the site plan? That's the town. So our inspector will be out there, we'll be out there to make sure that for everything from the pavement that goes down, to the signage, to the fact that the gates are locked when they're supposed to be, and the other components, that'll be our end of things. The DEP is responsible for its regulations.
It was a 300-foot buffer for the water from the site? Was it 300 feet?
Well, it's a disturbed site, so they're operating within the footprint of the existing disturbance, and I think someone mentioned they did have a Highlands exemption number 4, which it's in the preservation area, but by virtue of the number 4 exemption, they can increase they can increase impervious coverage up to 25% more.
And stormwater regs? They complied with all of that?
Well,
Yeah.
it was addressed through the
Okay.
hearings. As far as traffic study, by the way, it's not always the case that the board requires a traffic study, and we're looking at an area out there. And by the way, the DEP mentioned, whether one agrees or not, in the DEP's review of it, that there was adequate roadways for, the roadway is there, and in terms of the level of service results from the traffic that's generated from this facility, in addition to the other Saxon Falls sand and gravel and other things, will not exceed the permitted levels of service.
Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Lloyd Deans, 79 Montauk Road. I'm actually just coming up here.
Excuse me, how do you spell your last name? I'm sorry.
Deans.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually coming here tonight to actually speak for some of the residents here. As I'm sitting here listening to what's going on, it just kind of concerns me. But first I want to say thank you to Colleen and Alex for really defending the council, right? Because I take onus to the gentleman here that said that you guys don't have a vote in something, right? If someone came to my house and said I couldn't have a say in something, I'd be pretty ticked off myself. But with that said, put yourself in the resident's place, right? If you guys lived on that road, how would you feel about this going on, right? And it's not much less the noise pollution, but more so the pollution, right? In the development agreement, I would ask if you guys can place, if this is okay, is there going to be some type of testing ongoing, a baseline testing to what it's like right now, right? What your pollution, air pollution is like, what your water pollution is like, and then we do this quarterly or so just to see if there's any movement in that, right? Because we want to, at the end of the day, look at how your basic life is going to be, right? With that said, and if so, and if we do find an increase in pollution, what's KDS plan to kind of fix that, right? Because they're here, they're grinding up materials on our property, in our residence. Do they have an onus in fixing that, right? All I've heard tonight was DEP. Well, what's KDS? What's your hold in this, right? What are you guys going to do to help fix this? So if something happened, God forbid this is like a Detroit situation, right? Because it can't happen. We can't just sit here and think that, nothing can happen here in Mount Olive, right? But what if something happens here? Whose onus is it? Is it going to be on you guys? Is it going to be in KDS? Whose problem is it going to be? It's going to be the residents living right there, right? They got to deal with that water contamination, right? Who's going to help them pay for that or help fix that? So what I would ask for you guys to do, and again, Alex and Alex, you guys have presented some great questions. I'm not sure what the rush is, if there is a rush for you guys to make a movement, but there's no traffic plan. I think, Colleen, you mentioned that. There's no Class B license. Come on. I don't know if there's a rush, but please take some time just to kind of consider what you guys are about to do today. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, our attorney.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. I'm not sure that gentleman walked in, but the opportunity to be heard before the planning board was July, and the decisions with regard to, the science, that was July of last year. And today, again, what I want to just reiterate from my previous statement is that through the developers agreement, that is the opportunity for someone from Mr. McGroarty's office, from the Township of Mount Olive, to make sure that all of the provisions and all of the safeguards and all of the things that he talked about before are actually met. So I wanted to put that on the record.
Ms. Lebo?
Thank you. I wanted to also pretty much say what our attorney said, but with the developers agreement, and Chuck, correct me if I'm wrong, that begins the process of them adhering to the agreements that were made at the planning board. So they haven't been able to do that yet because we haven't approved it to get to that point. The other concern, that's why I was asking a lot of questions, I wanted to, because I was on the planning board a while back, and they are my favorite meetings to go to, believe it or not. And anyway, so in order for us to get to the point where we can take some corrective measures and understand what has happened since this has started, even on a limited amount, doing their own business, there's a lot of really great information that we could start to correct some of these issues. As far as the weight, one thing that our attorney has mentioned, and it's a huge tool we have, is that we can decrease the weight limit. And the one thing with that one bridge on Kinney, it may be able to take more weight, but whoever that section is, it was decided that they're not going to let any more than 5 tons go on there. We can do the same. We can say we're not going to let any more than X amount of tons to restrict the traffic and so on and so forth. And with that, there'll be another discussion going on with the company. Well, do you guys really want to do that? We're going to have to go down this road. We'll have to go down that road. So this is actually step one of the process of getting them to adhere to what has been agreed upon. Even Chuck mentioned they went out there and found out a couple of things were going on that shouldn't have been happening just yet because they weren't that far along in the process. And they explained it to them, and now they're working on that. So as much as it's hard to move forward, I don't know for sure, our attorney can tell us, but if we choose not to agree to this developers agreement tonight, we're just going to open ourselves up for a lawsuit because this has already been played out with the professionals and the testimony, and even though I would have liked if everybody had been noticed, we weren't. And so that's my
and that is
2 cents.
the issue, speaking with the attorney. I understand, sympathize, and I'd love to do something and figure out a way that we can stop those trucks from coming through your neighborhood, and we might be able to do that. The opportunity to do it is with this agreement. By law, we have no choice at this point is the problem, because it wasn't to us. The way it worked was, as we mentioned, it went to the planning board approved it. That's their instruction. We can't undo that right now because legally that's the process. What we can do is try to find a way to avoid those trucks from coming through your front of your homes. That's the best hope that we have to help you at this point, and there's not much more, unfortunately, that we can do. And I think we're all inclined and all sympathetic to that because, as you had mentioned, the gentleman back there mentioned, I would be the same way living there. I would not want that, and I could certainly understand that.
Absolutely.
And if there's a way that we can figure this out, and we will, we're not going to say it idly that we're going to do something, we're going to try. We're going to do what we can to make that happen as soon as possible. But again, just so you understand, even if we wanted to vote no, it's very difficult for us to do because eventually it's going to go through regardless because it's the law. We can't change something that we didn't vote on and approve. It has to come from the planning board. Just so you understand the process, because otherwise I guarantee you we would say no to this and wait, but it's not going to make a difference because they're going to come back and it's already been approved and there's nothing we can do about that part. But I just want to assure you all that we will look into this quickly to figure a way that we can help with these routes because there shouldn't be a lot of trucks coming through there if there's alternatives, which it sounds like there is. And we will look into that further as we go forward with this.
Yeah,
I think we're all in agreement with that. Mr. Amianda?
Yeah, Mr. President, we made a mistake. We made a mistake by approving that developer out there. we made a mistake by approving that mistake there. And we can also correct the mistake. Because if we made a mistake, we have to pay for it. We have to pay for it.
Did you say we made a mistake approving that at
Yes.
the planning board level?
Well-
Yes.
I have to disagree with you. I'm a member of the planning board, okay? I was chairman for 12 years, and I always ask my attorney, if we turn an application down, can we defend it in court? And if the attorney said to me, no way,
There's nothing we
you only
can-
spend taxpayers' money by trying to fight something that you're gonna lose.
No, we can go to court. If we made a mistake, someone else has to decide it.
Who's saying we made a mistake?
No, because I remember when this thing was in a preliminary stage, there was a question about the traffic. I read in the paper that they were going to close traffic going through the Waterloo Valley there. And so they didn't know how the trucks are going to be coming to the new development, right? So that was a stage where you should have stopped and corrected that. You did not. You let it go through it. But then we went ahead and signed the agreement with the development. So we made a mistake. We shouldn't have done that.
Well, I totally disagree with you about the planning board making a mistake.
They followed
I
the law,
disagree.
Mr. Emil, that's all it was.
But I'm willing to pay the price for make a mistake. So what I'm saying is that we cannot approve this resolution number 17, and then you say you are going to correct it later. We can't. The only thing that you tell the developer that we made a mistake, we are ready to go to court
Well,
to
as
defend it.
our
attorney-
council
yeah.
president stated,
And the attorney.
we can always change the weight limit on the
Correct.
roads. But right now, the answer is to approve the developer's agreement.
Mr. Amianda, we can't change, I'm talking to the attorney, there's no way to go back and change what was already voted on in law. We can't, it's part of the law, or we would have done it on the planning board level.
This is going to be a lesson to the planning board in this town, because you have to consider the residents, not what
It's
the
the
law
law.
says. You are there to protect the residents, and we can go back and tell them that, really, we made a mistake, we want to make life.
Please stop using made a mistake, please.
We made a mistake.
I'm offended.
It all comes down to the law, I'm sorry, but that's.
Pardon?
It's the law, it is what it is, you
It's-
follow
it's
the rule of the
wrong.
law, whether we like it or not. But we could find ways, as I said, to try and solve the problem that's a concern right now, which is the noise, the
Like you
trucks.
said, the weight limit on his roads.
Right, we can figure that out. Everything else is part of the law that we can't change, but we can change something that we can try to work with, and we will, as I said. Did you have something else?
Yeah, just one last thing. This is from the asphalt millings guidance document. It was implied that asphalt is not dangerous. I'm not an environmental person, but this is right from the NJDEP. It says the bitumen binder used in asphalt paving applications contains a relatively large concentration of a family of carcinogenic compounds, which can pose serious health and environmental concerns in certain circumstances, such as when, is everybody ready? When it's ground into very small particles that easily blow off of or wash from the surface. Later on, it says they have the potential to significantly migrate from the roadway through the actions of water, wind, and physical displacement, and possibly contaminate surrounding soils and/or surface water sediments. So even if they pave the, where they're grind and stuff, you guys know what the water's like. It hits. I mean, I have torrents running down my backyard towards the Musconetcong River. I can see it from the back of the house. So it ain't going to stay there, or it isn't going to stay there. I got to keep my English teachers happy.
Joe?
Council President, let me just for the record, I'm not here to be argumentative, certainly. I can do that at home. I will say that one of the many things, and again, as the gentleman said earlier, here at DEP quite frequently, yes, DEP, we, just like whether it's freshwater wetlands or Class B recycling, I don't have the authority, nor does the town engineer, to enforce it. The DEP does. What we can do is make sure that the DEP is enforcing, including, when I say we can do that, we can sit at our pre-construction meeting, we can conduct as many inspections as need be, and if we need to constantly alert DEP that they're not adhering to their own regulations, we can do so. But to that point about the asphalt, it is not classified as a hazardous material for a Class B recycling. It's not allowed to be. They are not allowed to have hazardous materials. But to the gentleman's point about if it's carelessly treated, it could be a problem. And that's why under 7:26A-4.1 DEP regulations, there's a long and very detailed process by which a Class B recycling facility has to be designed so that airborne products, et cetera, don't occur. And that's why we want to get to a point where it's not operating like some rogue operation. We want it to be in compliance with local and state requirements.
And the only issue, again, just so we're clear, is it doesn't please, I'm sure, any of us that we have to pass this by the law, but the important part is the developer's agreement. Without that developer's agreement, as the attorney's just saying, again, all these checks and balances we can't implement until we have this developer's agreement. So without them signing this and us signing it, we can't go back to them and do these setup where we're going to have an agreement that X amount of tests, things are going to be done. And that's why we need this agreement, fortunately or unfortunately. And again, it's part of the process, part of the law, part of the requirements. Again, like I say, I know I could speak for most of us here now. We would probably not be in favor of doing that if we didn't have to, but we do. But again, we will address the concerns and figure out a way to help you guys where you live. Because right now it's about the noise, the trucks, and everything else at this point. The DEP and all the regulations will go through the developer's agreement, and it'll be up to us and the DEP to make sure that they're on top of everything they're supposed to be doing and do the checking and quality stuff that we need to do for the township, and we will. Because it's an important thing. We have a great planning department here, Chuck and all, and they do follow the rules and make sure things are being done the way they're supposed to be. So I can assure you that will be done. But I can assure you that we will bring this up and update you on this. The residents will get an update. We'll let you know what's going on and what we plan to do that. And that's the best that we can do at this point, given the circumstances and the laws, unfortunately. Yes, Mr. Roman?
Andrew, could you coordinate with Chuck's office and send us a memo on what any efforts that we can do to mitigate the quality of life impacts to the residents in that area? Thank you.
Mr. Roman? I mean, Mrs. Laycock, wrong one.
I just want to point out that Mr. McGarty and late Mr. Brzezinski and the rest of our staff on the for our planning board, I've gone to so many meetings, and like I said, I was on the planning board for 1 year, and before that I went to dozens of meetings. And one thing I've always been impressed with is the level of research that our staff does and checks everything out. And after an application has been approved, and it's to this point, they are right there. I mean, they're checking everything out. So that's why once I'm realizing, okay, we're at that point where they're kind of like doing their operation for their own companies without any guidance right now, without any kind of oversight. And I think we need to get this moving right away so that we can also identify if there's any other issues and get working on it that way. Is that correct, Mr. McGarty? I think.
I agree.
Yeah. That's my thoughts, and I just
Mr. Amianda?
No, my point here is that then let's table that item, and then after we have come up with a resolution how we are going to resolve the quality of life we have affected those people there, the kids, the trucks running on those roads, and the kids' parents are afraid when the kids are crossing the road from what is happening. How are you going to correct that? Other than doubling this development there, they shouldn't have been that big development there. If you are also doing a good job, why didn't you invite the people that hold a hearing and hear their opinion, what they thought about it? So that means that you overlook the people you are serving. You should have let the people discuss this before you went as far as where we are now.
We understand that, and thank you, Mr. Amianda. Just the bottom line is, without this agreement, we can't address those concerns.
Exactly.
That's the issue. We're in a catch-22. If we don't approve the agreement, we can't go back to set up these guidelines and rules and things we want to do. That's the issue. They're going to keep functioning, as Mrs. Lebow said, just doing their own work without any rules and regulations in place because we don't have an agreement in place. So we need this agreement more so to do things for the residents that we want to try to do. That's what we're saying, just so you know.
What I'm trying to say is that we don't have to approve this agreement. That's what I'm saying.
We do.
Table it, and we will have to revisit it after we have come up with a solution. But the development there, the land is still there, the property is still there. Whatever it can also be put to the future use than what we have now. But you don't say that we cannot proceed without approving this. That's not right.
Thank you.
I appreciate the council's time, and this may not be relevant to this discussion, but Mr. McGroarty, you mentioned that you had initially argued against, as I understood it, the permission for this business on this site, but a variance. No, that's not what I said. Okay, I believe you. But you did say that a variance was permitted, which overruled whatever your concern was there. Is that correct?
Not to engage in the discussion on it, I did a very perfunctory task, which is I said that a recycling operation is not a permitted use in the mining district. And therefore it needs, in my judgment, what is known as a D1 use variance. The applicant and Mr. Inglesino, who is a very experienced land use attorney, did not disagree. So they pursued a D1 use variance, and what I said was they bifurcated it. In other words, they came in, if they were unsuccessful in getting the use variance, they wouldn't go for a site plan. They were successful in demonstrating that a recycling facility like this meets the criteria for what is known as an inherently beneficial use. And I can bore you for another hour with what all that means, but essentially that it serves a public good. And the fact that the county has already was at that point enthusiastic about bringing this online and putting it into its solid waste management plan supported the applicant's position. So it wasn't that I argued for or against it. I simply said it's not permitted. The burden then fell on the applicant to demonstrate to the planning board that they meet the statutory requirements for a use variance, and we did, since the board approved.
Thank you, Mr. McGroarty, for the explanation. I appreciate it, and I also understand the legal situation that you find yourselves in and that we find ourselves in. There are several key pieces that hang on this. One is the 200-foot notification, which clearly did not somehow overrode our concerns because we were not notified. And this variance appears to me, Mr. McGroarty, I'm sorry if I'm incorrect, and also the gentleman from the KDS, did not take fully into account the environmental concerns on the site, and those permits have not yet been received. I just bring that, I again recognize that this does not address the issues before the council in terms of the legal requirement to pass this resolution.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your input. Does anyone else from the public wish to be heard at this time? Seeing none, we're closed to the public. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Let me check on the sheet here, wherever I went to. Okay.
Thank you, John.
Oh, okay. We're going to pause for 2 minutes. Michelle has to get some information. Not yet. Okay, cool.
I just wanted to say something nice about it.
I have extra pills I got for Daisy. It's the Metrazine pill. If I could have brought you one, you would have. That stuff immediately. I mean, it's the only thing that works immediately. Yes. Yes. Well, I had this with Daisy for a long time. I had to put her on a prescription ID from 60 years ago. And I have these pills for backup just in case she gets it. Because she actually likes ice cream.
Thank you for your time.
Peanut butter pretzels.
Is that a good thing or bad?
So you go. How do you see
the couch?
The dog is having issues like that.
Appreciate you coming tonight. Thank you very much.
I know. Good luck.
Just drop this in the office. Yeah. I'll be
Okay, we're going to go back to open up the Mount Olive Council meeting for May 28th, 2019. Okay. I got that. Roll call, please, Michelle. Oh, Open Public Meetings Act, please. I'm sorry. I forgot.
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Here.
Mr. Ferrante.
Here.
Mrs. Leibau.
Here.
Mr. Mania.
Here.
Mr. Stewart.
Here.
Mr. Roman.
Here.
Mr. Nacastro.
Here.
Emergency.
Mr. Amianda, would you please give the approval for the previous meeting for the March 14th workshop and public meeting
Yes,
and the
Mr.
closed session?
Yes, Mr. President. I make a motion for approval of minutes of the previous meetings on May 14, 2019, work session and public meeting. John Ferrande was absent, and also minutes of the May 14, 2019 closed session. John Ferrand was also out.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante.
Abstain.
Mrs. Leibau.
Yes.
Mr. Mania.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro.
Yes, we have 14 pieces of correspondence. Does anyone have anything on those? Seeing none, next item on the agenda for first reading is ordinance number 11-2019, an ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morrison, State of New Jersey, amending Chapter 294, peddling and solicitation. Mr. Ferrante.
Sure, I move that ordinance number 11-2019 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on June 11th, 2019 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Anyone from the public wish to be heard on that?
You know we're getting a tornado warning and told to take shelter now?
Did not
Yes.
see that.
It didn't say take shelter. Yeah, it did.
Yeah, it did.
It does say take shelter.
It does say take shelter.
To me, this looks like shelter.
Well, maybe in the hallway might be better.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move it along.
Yeah, we'll just, okay, and
What
today,
about Tim? Where did
8:45.
Tim go?
What's that?
Where did Tim go?
He wants to do his job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
We'll move it along. Anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, anyone from council? Roll call, please.
This was on ordinance 11-2019,
I'm
first reading, correct?
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Amianda.
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante.
Yes.
Mrs. Leibau.
Hey, did you say first reading or second reading?
First reading.
First reading.
It's first reading.
First reading.
First reading.
Okay.
Mrs. Leibau.
Yes.
Mr. Mania.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro.
Yes. Let's see, we have 18 consent resolutions. Anyone wish to move any to non-consent?
Yeah, I'd like
Mr.
to
Roman.
have number one, non-consent.
Yeah, 3, okay, so we have, move number 1 resolution, non-consent. Any others? Mr. Roman?
Make a motion that we move number 17 to non-consent.
Thank you. I got confused. Who's up? Ms. Leibau, would you move resolutions 2 through 16 and 18?
I'm sorry, could we also have number 4?
We can add number 4. So would you move What do we
One,
get?
I move
2 through
2
Yeah.
and 3.
3.
5 through 16 and 18.
And 18, correct.
There we go. Second?
Anyone second? Anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, close to the public. Council, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Fronte?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Mr. Mania, did you want to move resolution number 1?
I make a motion to approve the bill list.
No. Resolution number 1.
Non-consent.
The non-consent resolution, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Non-consent resolution number 1.
I move resolution number 1 to non-consent.
No.
No, it's already
approval.
non-consent. You're moving it. We're done.
You
Moving
want
it for a vote, John. Moving it for a vote.
It's the
I move.
resolution
You
for
move for a
Gene
vote.
I move.
Bazinski. Did you
Okay.
want to say
Second.
anything?
Do you want to say anything? Do you want to read it into the record?
Okay.
I would like to read it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Is that okay? with you?
Pretty long.
It's pretty long. I'll read it fast, but I really want it to be in the record verbatim. And this is resolution of the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris and State of New Jersey honoring the life, legacy, and dedicated service of Eugene F. Bazinski. Whereas Eugene Bazinski, lovingly known as Mr. B, passed away in the age of 69 on Thursday, April 17th, 2019 at St. Clair's Hospital in Dover. And whereas Gene was born and raised in Manchester, New Hampshire, and lived in Parsippany before moving to Landing 32 years ago. And whereas Gene began his distinguished career as a civil engineer with Shore De Palma Engineering in Parsippany and transitioned to Van Cleve Engineering in Mount Arlington, where he worked for 34 years. And whereas Gene served as a township engineer and planning board engineer for more than 20 years, overseeing various township projects and developments. And whereas during his many years with the township, Gene worked closely with other township professionals who praised his engineering expertise, work ethic, engaging personality, and graciousness in interacting with others. And whereas Gene was a member of the Knights of Columbus Council number 6320 in Succassana, and whereas Gene was a loving family man who always put family first, and whereas Gene found the most joy on the Jersey Shore as a lifelong soccer and baseball coach to many, including his children and grandchildren, and whereas Gene is survived by the love of his life, his wife, Colleen, niece Sutton, his son, Eugene A., and his wife, Danielle, his daughter, Jane Marie Bazinski, his sister, Marcia McCooey, and her husband, Daniel, and his 4 grandchildren, Morgan, Austin, Julia, and Jennifer. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Mayor and Township Council of the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris and State of New Jersey that Eugene F. Bazinski is hereby recognized and honored for his dedication, service, and commitment to the Township of Mount Olive. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone from the public? Seeing none?
I
Yes.
just wanted to say
No.
for 30 seconds how fondly my firm feels about Mr. Bazinski and about how kindly he treated me when I first started the firm. And meeting with him to work on one of the projects in Flanders, I thought he was a very special man. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Fronte?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Ms. Laybow, would you move consent resolution number 4, please?
Yes, I'd like to move resolution number 4.
Second?
Second.
Anyone from the public? Seeing none, anyone from council?
I just wanted to say, I don't know how many had a chance to read through this rain tax.
Been reading it for a long time.
I'm just like blown away, and
is.
I hope that it does not move forward on the state level, because it's like, come on, I mean, there's some taxes we have to, this is like the most absurd tax
That's why a
I've
lot of
seen in a
towns are
long
not doing
time.
it. That's why
I
a lot of
know.
the towns are
Yeah,
voting against
I
it.
see no plus in
Well,
that
thank
one.
you.
Thank you.
Do we have a second on that?
I'd just like to also comment on the non-consent resolution number 4. I applaud our state legislators for bringing this resolution forward and to put townships on the record. This is a clear example of the state because of poor fiscal management, constantly trying to find new avenues to tax us even more. And I wholeheartedly support this resolution.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Mr. Roman, would you move?
I move for approval, non-consent resolution number 17.
Second?
Anyone from the public? Seeing none, close to the public. Anyone from council? Mr. Roman?
This resolution is an example of those hard decisions that every once in a while we have to face, that where, you know, our heart and our, you know, mind may want to guide us in a separate direction, but unfortunately the law is rather clear. And I take my position here, and I'm sure everyone else on this council does as well, when we have to make decisions that are purely based on law, and we have to protect not only the township against lawsuits, but protect the taxpayers against unneeded attorney's fees, no offense to you.
None taken.
So, unfortunately, I will be voting in the affirmative for this resolution.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
No.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Let's see, Mr. Mania, would you please move the bill list?
I make a motion, we approve the bill list.
Second.
Anyone from the public? None? Anyone from council prior to that or after that?
Yeah, I just want to ask a quick question. I'm getting text messages from residents asking, how come some are here getting notices to, secure in place or,
And some aren't?
take shelter in place and others aren't?
Because it depends where, like it said, it was 10 miles from Netcom. So it depends
Well,
where
they're
they
only
are.
a mile down the, not
It's
even.
between Netcom
Yeah.
and Newton right
Right.
now.
No, this
so-
is people are right down the street here.
Right.
Well, yeah, my daughter got it right here,
Does she?
because we're right around this area.
But I'm talking Sand Shore School, they're not getting it that way.
Probably isn't up that far, they're saying.
Oh.
It's got to be, based on the thunderstorm line is what
Could
they're
it be
basing it on.
whatever systems that they're?
Because that's from the Weather Channel they're getting it. We're all getting it from the Weather Channel.
I'll do with what I can do.
I didn't get one from the town.
I did.
No.
I got the county alert.
Oh, I only got the Weather Channel ones. I'm sorry, but
Okay, sorry, I just
Yeah.
wanted to, I'm getting these
anyway,
questions.
yeah, we'll get
and-
going so we don't get caught in here anyway.
Yeah.
Do we have any, roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Amianda?
Oops, my sunroof.
Yep. We'll-
Mr.
we'll move.
Amianda?
Yes, Mr. Amianda, on the bill list?
On the bill list.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes, administrative reports, do we have anything?
Just to wish Councilwoman Labow a happy birthday tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Okay, that's a good one.
Now I'm
We're trying
embarrassed.
to get before the storm comes. Let's see. Any old business?
You got me, Andrew.
Any new business? Any legal matters?
Nothing.
Council reports, Mr. Amianda, anything from Board of Ed or seniors?
No, none.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrante, anything from Environmental Lake or Library?
None.
Mr. Stewart, Economic or Community Action?
Economic Development, June 6th for multi-EDC and business community event run through the Morris County Economic Development Corporation.
Thank you. Ms. Labow, anything open space, health, or stigma?
Nope.
Mr. Maney, anything legislative or planning?
Planning. The mayor had asked me the previous meeting to find out if Mrs. Laybow's proposal to put bollards in front of storefronts. Planning board unanimously opposes bollards at storefronts. And speaking with Mr. McGroarty, it would have to be by ordinance if it were to be done.
Okay. It's good to know.
We also approved capital review, Lou Nelson Park, where there's been a lot of vandalism. That's been taken care of. And we approved a office warehouse on 700 International Drive, 63,000 square foot warehouse office. I Spy Media has been carried to July 11th.
Thank you. Mr. Roman, anything on Record Pride?
I have nothing to report.
Did you have something, Ms. Leyba?
I was just saying, my son just sent me a text said that the tornado hit Lenape Valley
Well,
High
that's why
School.
we're going to get out of here.
Yeah.
Let's see what's going on. Anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, close to the public. Any council comments? Mr. Arianda?
None.
Mr. Ferrante?
None.
Ms. Leyba?
None.
Mr. Maynard?
No.
Be safe.
Stewart?
Happy birthday to her, that's it.
Mr. Roman?
Oh, thank you.
None.
And none for me. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Everyone be safe. Be careful out there.
Stay though, I don't know if the next one.
You want this back, Michelle?
I'm supposed to go. I don't know. Down south. Harrison, they got warned down there, too.
My son said the one
She didn't say stay home.
relative
Of course.
in
Are you gonna
Sandhook,
stay
the
home?
deck just blew off of the house.
It's not like, are you